Howdy, folks. Welcome to the PodCAST Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. On today's episode, I have the extreme honor to interview Steve Reider. Many of you will recognize Steve from your visits to Sloss while attending previous national cast iron art conferences at Sloss Furnaces. In this interview, you'll find out firsthand more of the intricacies of how Sloss is organized and what it takes to run a metal arts program at a national historic landmark. Steve, thank you so much for chatting with me about your passion for the arts. Your support allows artists like me to grow, create, and thrive. I am so grateful for the passion you show metal artists and the roles that you hold at Sloss because you help keep the National Conference at Sloss alive and well supported, but also you have championed some remarkable achievements for the Sloss Metal Arts Artist in Residence program, and with these benefits, you are forging forward and upward the standards of living that should be given to artists across the board. So thank you. The PodCAST Iron Show is sponsored in part by supporters on Patreon. So thank you to everyone who has joined as a Patreon member to help me afford the production costs of this show. I'd also like to thank the top supporters of the show, which are Sloss Metal Arts and the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance. Sloss Metal Arts, which we're going to talk about a lot today, so buckle up, is a national center for iron casting and metal art. And they are hosting the upcoming national conference, which is going to be this April 5th through the 8th at Sloss National Historic Landmark in Birmingham, Alabama. So for more information about the Sloss Metal Arts program, visit their website, which is slossmetalarts.com, and also follow them on Instagram at Sloss Metal Arts. And the conference at Sloss is almost upon us. You can register online for the conference at nccciap.com, which is the conference's website. So go visit their website and see what workshops are available. And I also believe that the deadline to apply for the juried exhibition show is March 11th. And you can find out more information about other opportunities like conference scholarships and ways to volunteer if you want to lend a helping hand. Also, follow NCCCIAP on Instagram to keep up to date with all of the opportunities as they develop. I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. And at this moment, I'm really looking forward to sharing this interview with you because Steve plays a large role in the organization of this conference that we all thoroughly enjoy every 2 years. I'm also delighted that the PodCAST Iron has recently gained a new top supporter, and that is the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance. Established in 2008, the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that consists of iron casting artists in the western states of the U.S. Their goals are to educate, demonstrate, and exhibit cast iron art in the Western region. And to accomplish this, they host a conference every 2 years. If you are a dedicated listener of the podcast, then you'll know that they just hosted their conference this past October of 2022 in South Dakota. So start planning to make it out west this fall of 2024. It's quite a ways away, so we've got plenty of time. Obviously, there are no solid dates this far in advance, but I will keep you informed when things start to develop. But a big thank you to the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance and their board members for helping me to afford the production costs of this podcast. So for more information about that fantastic organization, visit their website, which is wciaa.org. So finally, let's get into the interview. This episode is brought to you by our top supporters, Sloss Metal Arts and the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and please enjoy. Steve Reider, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Good evening. Nice to chat with you.
It's such an honor to be able to talk to you, and I'm so just excited to learn more about you and your role at Sloss Metal Arts. So without further ado, we're going to start with our first question, which is, well, Steve, who the hell are you anyways?
Well, good evening. And first, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for having me on the podcast. So who am I? Obviously, we're all a lot of different things in in this world, but from the perspective of our metal arts community, I serve as board president of Sloss Furnaces Foundation, which is the nonprofit organization that oversees the metal arts program and various preservation, education, research, development initiatives at Sloss Furnaces. And then I also serve as a board member of Sloss Furnaces National Historic Landmark, which is the city-appointed board that actually oversees the operations and management of the Sloss Furnaces site. Those are both volunteer roles that I've held for more years than I care to remember, and let's just say far enough that I wasn't as gray as I am today when I started my tenure at Sloss. I've lived in Birmingham 30 plus years, and by day I have the much more mundane role. I'm a career banker who worked for a local bank for about a dozen years and then started a consulting company called Bankography that provides strategic planning services to banks and credit unions across the US. And so my vocation and my avocation are quite different.
Well, thank you for that. I slightly understand more. I didn't know that you hold two different positions. Are they very interconnected in the workings?
They are, and it's good to explain a bit about Sloss's organizational structure. So Sloss Furnaces, the museum, is owned and operated by the city of Birmingham.
Okay.
But one of the challenges that any municipally owned property faces is that it lives under the constructs of a municipal government. And so, for example, if a visitor wanted to make a donation to Sloss Furnaces, you can't write a check to Sloss Furnaces National Historic Landmark. You can only write a check to the city of Birmingham. And then the city of Birmingham could use that to pave a pothole or fix a traffic light or hire a teacher. And these are all good and noble things, right? But it's not what the visitor intended.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like a lot of similar museums and such, our art museum works the same way. The art museum is owned by the city. There's a nonprofit entity, a foundation, that serves as the fiscal agent for the venue, mm-hmm. and can receive and disperse funds. But then we throw in the wrinkle that Sloss has a metal arts program.
Yeah.
And a city is really geared up for repetitive, high volume tasks, like shuttling lots of students to their elementary school every morning, mm-hmm. or replacing every street light.
Yeah.
There's not really a job grade in the city hierarchy for throwing recycled iron and coke into a cupola and blasting it with a heating source until it melts, and then ramming out the plug and letting 2,700 degree molten iron run through that. And so the city rightfully doesn't necessarily want to manage those functions. And so the metal artists come under the auspices of Sloss Furnaces Foundation, which of course separate legal entity, and separate staffing, carries its own insurance policies and mm-hmm. and such for those exigencies of the metal casting process. We obviously work hand in hand very closely together, Sloss Furnaces National Historic Landmark and Sloss Furnaces Foundation, and every day we're knitting them closer together to form a single operation, which we find is for the greatest efficiency of the site. Mm-hmm. But we're not quite there yet. Mm-hmm. So yes, they are distinct roles. For example, in my role as on the Landmark Board, we recently hired the new executive director of Sloss Furnaces.
Yes.
And we have significant interaction with the office of the mayor and the approval of our operating budget and certain capital improvements. Mm-hmm. The foundation really oversees specific, again, the metal arts program, and then specific capital initiatives. And here's one I'm excited for you to see in April, the lighting project, where we've added dramatic aesthetic lighting at Sloss, and that was all those funds were raised through the private sector. And even things like if you needed to accomplish that through the city, it has to go through the city bid process. And there's certain, it would have been months before we just got through the request for proposal phase.
Yeah.
And we couldn't have turned that nearly as quickly as through a nonprofit.
I was hoping
So
that you
that's a
were
bit
going
about
to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a bit about the two different boards that I serve on in my
Okay.
volunteer roles at Sloss.
All right. I'm going to try and keep on mulling that over, because obviously, since it's so new to me, I'm still in the infancy of my understanding. So as we go through the interview, if I flub up or misreference something, correct me, but kindly. But that's a
And I would
lot.
tell you, to the visitors, we hope everybody simply views it as Sloss, right? As one fully assimilated entity.
And I'm sure they do. I mean, I definitely do when I come. So, well, so let's maybe rewind quite a bit and talk about your childhood, which isn't what everybody likes to talk about, but I like to just kind of hear maybe one anecdotal story about kind of like maybe something that happened to you in childhood that helped you develop into the person that you are today.
One of the things I found was interesting when I saw your list of questions. Of course, it's geared towards your artist guests, and tell me about your introduction to the arts, and tell me about your medium, and I will tell you that I have zero aptitude in the arts. Cannot draw a straight line to save my life. Am tone deaf. No musical aptitude. No drawing aptitude. No theatrical skills. But I do have some arts in the gene pool. My dad was an architect.
Mm-hmm.
My sister is a graphic designer.
Mm-hmm.
I have a cousin who is a tremendously accomplished artist who shows in galleries nationwide, and she's the middle on the other side of on kind of the other branch of the family, and so we kind of have that arts bond.
Yeah.
And my sister's been like I said, not only is she a graphic artist, but I mean she attended Philadelphia College of Art, which is now University of the Arts, and
Yeah.
has had an entire career in the graphic arts. When I'm back home in Philadelphia, I still, driving around, can look at a shopping center and, hey, Dad designed that.
Yeah.
And Dad was a commercial architect. He only did 2 residential single family residences in his entire career. But one of them, on a trip back to Philadelphia, my wife and I went to find, and oh my God, it is the most spectacular 1960s modernist house.
Oh, that's
off
fabulous.
off of Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia, which is a kind of affluent neighborhood downtown. But so I guess that's where the interest in the arts maybe comes from as a kid. I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, like not a suburbanite. The nearest house to ours was attached.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was a walk. Yeah, I grew up in a neighborhood of duplexes and row houses, and walked to the bus stop on the subway, and I have a deep affinity for public transit that still holds today.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an arts memory.
That's okay, though.
I do remember one time a junior high or high school art teacher telling me that when we had to do this like final painting project, and she said, the best thing I can say to you about your skills as an art student is that you're a good student in math.
Oh, okay. Well,
and one time, even on an arts project, I copped out and like wrote a biography of an artist instead of actually doing an arts project. But by the time I got to college, I took an art history class. I took a history of architecture class. I mean, I had an interest in arts that probably came from mom and dad dragging us to a lot of museums over the years, and I think maybe making sure we had that that formative cultural understanding, even if we wouldn't appreciate it for years later.
Mm-hmm. And I think that here in the metal arts community, we're definitely reaping benefits from those kind of early introductions, even though you might not identify as an artist, or you definitely just told us
Clearly not.
You don't. But being a supporter of the arts is just as important, because all of us artists, we don't necessarily have the funds to support ourselves. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So we definitely appreciate where you came from. And so I obviously before this, I didn't know anything about your childhood. And so I thought maybe you grew up in Birmingham just because I didn't know. So how did you land in Birmingham?
Yeah. So I mentioned that whole public transit thing and,
Yeah.
walking to school and buses and subways and you do that for enough years and you can see here, I'm a skinny little guy. You that wind goes right through you and you develop an aversion to cold weather pretty easily.
I can
So
understand. Yeah.
yeah, so I was never going to be one to settle in the in the chilly northern climes, and
Mm-mm.
so I went south for college and went to school at Tulane University in New Orleans and
Oh, yeah.
got about
Way
as
we
far
went
south
way
and
south.
as far south and warm and humid as I could get, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the rest is kind of happenstance. I got my first job out of college with the bank in Birmingham with AmSouth Bank
Okay.
in Birmingham. Birmingham was to me always the city that I was going to leave 2 years from now.
Mm. Hmm.
But kind of like your diet, like everybody's diet, right? When are you going to start your diet? Next week,
On Monday.
right? I'm always going to start it next Monday,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
always going to leave in 2 years and 2 more years,
Yeah.
and and then the next thing you find yourself volunteering and on boards of directors, and then I got married, and you
Yeah.
build an identity and a home in a community, and 30 some years later, I'm still here.
Yeah. Do you like the weather better in Birmingham?
Clearly.
So it's interesting because I grew up in Massachusetts, pretty cold. And
Ah,
then I went to school at the University of Georgia, which everybody listening to this podcast is already like, would she stop talking about the University of Georgia? But then right after grad school, I moved to St. Louis and I found that it was kind of in the middle. It's like
sure.
not too cold, not too hot, just right. But Birmingham is definitely warmer than St. Louis is.
Yeah, and it's quite akin to Athens.
Yeah, it's
In
about the
right,
same
it's on the same latitude for sure.
latitude. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I'm so excited. I just can't wait to get to the point where we're going to start talking about the conference because I'm already reminiscing about driving from Athens to Birmingham and driving every time I go to Memphis, I would still stop because you go through Birmingham. And so when I was in grad school and I'd go to Memphis a couple of times to go to the National Ornamental Metal Museum in Memphis,
Sure.
Tennessee, but I would always at least drive to the gates of Sloss just to like pay homage to just do a little tribute drive through or something. Even if I didn't have a chance to stop, I would just at least say hi to the furnace.
Love hearing that story.
Anyways, okay, so let's get to that point. So, okay, so you're in Birmingham. Let's see. So, how did you get introduced to Sloss and the furnaces? Were you aware of it as you moved in and you're getting acquainted with the city? I mean, obviously you can't miss it, but how did that happen?
I had no pre-existing awareness of Sloss when I came to Birmingham,
Mm-hmm.
but Birmingham has a limited set of tourist attractions, particularly 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so you pretty quickly, if you want to get acquainted with the city and learn what it has to offer, it's Sloss and Vulcan and our art museum. Now we have our civil rights museum.
Yeah.
And that's about it. I mean, we would often joke that that's the morning tour of Birmingham is Vulcan, Sloss, and the Civil Rights Museum.
Yeah.
Then you're done. So, but yeah, so that was my introduction to Sloss, was just to say, let me see what this city has to offer, in neat old place there. I actually knew nothing about the metal arts program. I had just taken the standard history tour.
Like the self-guided.
Exactly, the self-guided, right,
Yeah.
starting in 1882,
Yeah, and
and
there's the plaques that were so Do you mind if I ask you what year you moved to Birmingham? Is that sensitive information? You don't.
No, 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 no. I'm just let me try to
It
count
can.
work. It would early 90s.
Yeah. That's okay. Because I'm trying to. Let's see. Because then you'll probably laugh at when I first came to Birmingham was in 2011. Yes. And so that was before the visitor center. It was
Hmm.
before the new entrance. I don't even
Oh,
think,
sure.
I think I mean, I'm sure you'll remember like people used to camp over there. Like they would come in. Now I guess it's the back entrance, but the entrance like kind of to the field and where the
Yeah, it's what we
old
call the
visitor.
North Gate. Yeah,
Yes.
or the
Okay.
North
So that
parking lot. Yeah,
you come in there and then, you know, you can enter or you have access to the visitor center. But then I remember people would go all the way back and camp where now the new visitor center is. And there would be like a tent city back there too.
sure.
And that's,
Yeah, and the architects when they built the new visitor center
yeah,
did something really smart by moving the entry gate to that south side of the site
yeah,
because that's where the postcard view is because that's the site where the conveyor belts, right? The
yeah,
conveyors come where the skip cars
yeah,
run up that would drop the raw materials into the furnaces. And of course, on that side, you're unimpeded by the First Avenue viaduct.
exactly. You're right. Yeah. Cause so I guess it was no, it was 2019 that I brought a bike and I was biking because on the steering committee and like we talked about a little bit before we started recording, the exhibitions were across the street. And so
Right.
as a committee member having to set up exhibitions in the new visitor center and then also way back in that warehouse of the back 40 and back and forth, I had to have a bike or else I would have never gotten anywhere. Like my legs, I would have walked my little legs off. And so I had a GoPro and as I was
Really
riding
cool.
my bike across and around, all the way around to the visitor center. And it's just, I don't, I don't know if GoPro footage is really worth anything, but it's a really great memory for me
Oh,
to
it,
be
it
able to,
sounds tremendously
it's
fun.
just, yeah. So you explaining that really, it makes sense after having that experience. It's wonderful. I mean, the building is beautiful. Now it'll be over 5, 6 years old now. I'm trying to remember. It was new in 2017 was the first time there was a conference that.
Yeah, 2015. It would have been completed in 2015,
Okay.
but I think we didn't quite have occupancy
Mm,
because that railroad track that you have to cross that
yeah.
parallels 32nd Street to get in,
Yeah.
the grade crossing wasn't complete.
Mm,
And and as a result, we couldn't get uh, license for occupancy because you couldn't necessarily smoothly get a fire truck or an ambulance
yeah.
in the wake of an emergency.
Yeah.
And an example of how having a private foundation can help get things done.
Mm, hmm.
Let's just say, without getting into too much detail, that we found a benevolent railroad worker who might have been willing to undertake an unlicensed side project one weekend, and
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of money changed hands, and poof, we came in on Monday morning and there was a fully graded paved crossing over the railroad.
And that's amazing that that kind of work can be done and it's for the greater good. Like
Exactly.
absolutely. And everybody, hopefully
And that's
everybody
it.
wins.
No one complained. It was a
Yeah.
classic example of that adage of it's easier to seek forgiveness than permission,
Yeah.
because permission wasn't getting it done. And that
Yeah.
building actually sat about 6 months completed but unoccupied, waiting on this grade crossing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, enough is enough.
That's yeah, and it's a story of a miracle. So I'm glad that that got done, and I mean, we love it. We love being able to, and I guess speaking for the whole community of iron artists that come to the conference, the obviously the exhibition space is above and beyond, blows our minds, but then also having a place for the panels where you can really have it's not like I think you probably remember panels being in one of the blower rooms or something with like a little projection roll up thing, and there's chairs, people are, to be able to have a room that's just dedicated to a panel so that we can actually concentrate on the panelists is, I mean, those other spaces still are really nostalgic and, warm our hearts to go in them too. Yeah.
And they're tremendous spaces, but they're not climate controlled. And so they can be unpleasant. I forget if I think it was 2017 was unusually cold the week of the conference, and that benefited the foundation because we sold a whole lot of sweatshirts. but
yeah,
but otherwise it was a little less pleasant. I will tell you too about, and to anybody attending who's attended over the years, you'll see this year that we're going to make even better use of those facilities. And again, this goes back to some of the historic organizational divide between the city-owned and the foundation side. In 2017, we did something really, really smart in Birmingham, which is we elected our bright young mayor, Randall Woodfin, and then the mayor understands the importance of arts and culture in the city, and
he came, right? He came.
That's right. He gave the opening remarks in 2019. Yeah. And he's awesome, and he's a rising star, and he's actually the mayor one. You remember Marshall Christie, our prior program director?
Absolutely.
Marshall was awesome, and Marshall invited the mayor one Friday night to come do bowl night, and the mayor and his entire senior staff came out, and they did scratch blocks and bowls, and it's really the support we've received from this administration has helped foster further integrating the foundation and the city operations to the point where, look, you'll remember days where artists were chastised for parking in the wrong places, and honestly, I mean, I remember fighting those battles with your artists are taking our parking spaces. Like, no, our guests of Sloss Furnaces are parking where guests should be parking. And again, under this administration, and now particularly under our new executive director, David Arias, is a huge arts fan and metal arts supporter, and is really dedicated to featuring the metal artist as a primary attraction of Sloss Furnaces. And to everyone who joins us in April at the conference, you're going to see that in terms of the really full scope of the site being invested for the support of the conference.
Yeah, that's so wonderful to hear. And I think that, I mean, I have to imagine that it's hard to all of a sudden have, I should start with, you have a certain amount of visitors that come through the site every, week or so. And there's like a metric that people, and then all of a sudden, boom, the entire kind of community of metal artists descend upon Birmingham and Sloss. And I mean, I have to imagine it. And also being a former board member of the committee, being a former committee member for the national conference, like it wrings a lot of resources dry. And emotionally from staff, is like, I can understand somebody's perspective of it, it being tough. And, but I'm really glad to hear that it's taken a turn for the more understanding. And I'm excited to see how that is going to manifest this April. So
yeah, it really has. And David is of the attitude that I was when I was confronted with this in a couple of conferences ago. No, it's not that having 500 people is disruptive. This is what we want to have every day. Right. And it may not be 500 metal artists. Maybe it's 500 school children for a tour. Maybe it's 500 historians for a research seminar. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's 15,000 people for a concert and a festival.
Yeah.
But yeah, we want that vibrance. We want that life. We want that energy at Sloss.
Yeah. That visitor count and that energy to be passed. Yeah. And so
Absolutely.
I'm glad that the metal arts community can provide that, and hopefully we'll be seeing maybe more of that picking up in the future. So let me get back to the thread of, because I still haven't learned how you got involved in Sloss Metal Arts. So did you get involved with Sloss Metal Arts before or after you saw your first iron pour?
After.
Okay, so what was it like?
Because I saw my first iron pour
Yeah.
not at Sloss.
Oh, okay. Whoa.
But and so this begins I guess a bit about my journey into the arts, is that my first volunteer assignment in Birmingham arts was not at Sloss, but a colleague of mine at the bank where I worked had said, I volunteer for a great organization called Magic City Art Connection. And Magic City Art Connection puts on our annual outdoor juried arts festival, right? You've got one in St. Louis as well. You know, most cities have a big kind of tent city, if you will. And so my friend had gotten me involved in that, and so I volunteered on. That always happened the last weekend of April each year in Lynn Park, which is the park right downtown by City Hall in downtown Birmingham. Through that, one year at the event, we had a group called Alabama Art Casting, which was Rick Batten's group. Do you know Rick? Is a longtime member of the metal arts community, and I believe he may have moved to Poland.
I don't know if our paths definitely have crossed, and the name has definitely come up in, but I don't think he would know who
Yeah.
We're in the family. He's a distant cousin, I guess I
Right.
would say. But I also am familiar with the Alabama Art Casting, because they would come to the National Ornamental Metal Museum for the Repair Days event that they have. This is when I first met some guys from that. So anyway, so I'm familiar with this organization.
But yeah, so that was where I saw my first iron pour and did my first scratch block was at Magic City Art Connection, not at Sloss. This is a lot of years ago here, so I'm kind of reaching to put the story together. But yeah, and I did a couple of scratch blocks with some of the artists who were who were exhibiting artists at Magic City Art Connection that I've become friends with over the years. And here's where the full circle of Sloss gets really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So also through some friends that I'd met volunteering at Magic City Art Connection, and there was a local gallery that would open in Birmingham called the Bare Hands Gallery.
Okay.
And that was opened by someone who I consider one of the most influential people in the turnaround of downtown Birmingham.
Okay.
And her name is Jessica Helfricht.
Okay.
Now let's circle fully today. You might know Jessica as the wife of Alan Peterson, Sloss artist in residence many years ago.
Okay.
Now professor of metal arts at Kennesaw State, one of your exhibiting artists at the various conferences, and just general amazing metal artist. But anyhow, this was before. I think this was before Jessica and Alan maybe had even met. But Jessica had the gallery, the Bare Hands Gallery, and the first Friday of every month she'd have the openings, and it was sort of the first hip, cool event to come to in downtown Birmingham.
All right.
I mean, she had repurposed an old building and the kind of thing that you see developers doing now, but she had actually done that with her bare hands, which is where the name Bare Hands Gallery came from. And I'm going to refurbish this with my bare hands. And Jessica was on the board of an organization called Sloss Furnaces Association.
Okay.
Now, the Sloss Furnaces Association was the original activist group that was founded in like the 1970s after Sloss closed, and the city of Birmingham was going to tear down the site and turn it into an industrial site, or right, there were a bunch of different uses on the table. They were the group, kind of the grassroots group that advocated for saving the furnaces.
Yeah.
And Jessica, you can just picture an artist. She was somehow the treasurer, but
Mhm.
she had that, left brain, right brain kind of thing, right? We were
Yeah.
on the sides of the continuum, and and one day she just called me and said, Steve, says, I'm love Sloss, but I'm really not good at this treasurer thing. And you're a banker. How'd you like to join our board and be our treasurer? And so that was how I ended up on the board of Sloss. And even then still didn't really know anything about the metal arts program. I just knew that Sloss was kind of this historic site, and I knew there were some folks that did sculpture down there, but that was about it.
Okay. And you just said, okay, I'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Well, you're a nice guy. I'm glad. So you're the treasurer. Was she still involved, or did you just switch out to
No,
have your?
she remained on the board.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you
just
weren't. She didn't just leave you. Okay.
no, she remained on the board, just not as
Okay.
the and in fact, to take things even full circle,
Yeah.
Magic City Art Connection,
Uh-huh.
after suspending a year for the pandemic in 2020,
Yeah.
in 2021 faced a decision about its location
Mhm.
and decided for a lot of reasons that, hey, wouldn't it be neat if we moved that event to Sloss Furnaces? And
Yeah.
so in 2021, Magic City Art Connection moved to Sloss. Now Birmingham's biggest outdoor art festival occurs at Sloss Furnaces every year, the last weekend in April.
Oh, wow.
And then last year in 2022, every year we have a signature arts authority, a museum curator, accomplished artist
Yeah.
serve as our juror, because we
Mhm.
hand out 15 different cash awards.
Yeah.
And to take things full circle, last year, Jessica returned to Birmingham as our juror at Sloss
Wow.
Furnaces for Magic City Art Connection. So,
Wow. That's a wonderful full circle story.
yeah.
Wow.
And there's a
Okay.
lot of them. There's a lot of them at Sloss. But
Yeah.
yes, and that was how I got involved at Sloss, was Jessica invited me to join the board.
Okay. So then did that group dissolve in a new one form, or did it evolve into what you are today?
So Sloss Furnaces Association
Yeah.
at the time was the group that employed the metal artists.
Okay.
And as I got onto that board, that was really how I learned the breadth and depth of the metal arts program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We had a city employee who was the director of the metal arts program, which was Paige Wainwright, which is a name you may
Yes.
recognize. Paige is long retired, but I know still has us tremendously in her heart.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Much
and
loved by many.
exactly. And the association handled basically some small preservation projects and the metal arts program.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to build the new visitor center,
Mm-hmm.
there was a belief by the Sloss executive director at the time that maybe we needed a more focused, separate organization.
Yeah.
And honestly, with some community leader heavy hitters, people who could write really big checks.
Yeah.
And so Sloss Furnaces Foundation was incorporated really as the fundraising entity purely for the new visitor center.
Okay.
They would go on to raise more than $3 million for that building that the city would match with an equivalent amount that led to the construction of that building.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that purpose was fulfilled, we realized we don't really need two parallel nonprofits.
Yeah.
And so Sloss Furnace Association dissolved
Mm-hmm.
and transferred its assets to Sloss Furnaces Foundation. And I somehow migrated over as treasurer of Sloss Furnaces Foundation as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I'm sure glad that you're still around and you're still holding strong, supporting us up on that front. Let's see. So so where does that put us now with our story? So that's how you got involved with Sloss. And so then I guess I'm curious to know, once you started seeing iron pours at Sloss. How did your opinion of these iron pours, like, what, because I'm assuming that the one that you saw at the art festival was probably on the smaller side because it was probably a traveling furnace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's
And
very similar to the road pours that
yeah.
our crew do today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it was still it's still pretty cool, right? Even a road pour, even the small cupolas are still pretty cool. And as I got more involved at Sloss and got to know some of the artists,
Mm-hmm.
had the ability to tour their studios and see the works involved in process, you just became it was easy to get fascinated and enraptured by the entire process. Some of the artists that we had in residence at the time, we had the amazing Tony Buchan and Geraldine Goodwin, who actually didn't pour metal, but mostly used a cold fabrication process.
Okay.
Tony, I think, has his PhD in physics, or at least an advanced degree, and created this amazing hydraulic press that would forge these tremendously delicate forms
Yeah.
out of metals. They were just gorgeous. And then of course we had the traditional iron casting artists as well. Yeah, some working in scale, everything from very small delicate pieces to if you remember Vaughn Randall, did you know, was one of our artists in residence, and Vaughn worked in some just scale significantly larger than a human.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
just these major installation pieces, and so it's hard not to be enthralled by that as you watch the genius of the creative process. To me, all the more so, as someone who has no artistic aptitude.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely glad that you found us and that you appreciate us and that you're invested in us and what we're doing. And so let's so I still, I feel like I still I'm dancing around it, but I just want to know, kind of like, do you remember the first time you saw a big furnace at Sloss run tap out into a bull ladle, like that much metal? I don't know, but maybe it's just because I may be projecting onto you because it's so amazing to me. But also
Yeah,
you
and
probably see it more frequently than I do.
I was going to say,
So,
and I always find it amazing, but I'm not. But I've seen so many now
mm,
over the years,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and that I'm not sure I remember the first time,
That's okay.
but each time is equally impressive. Right? I'm always amazed that every time I watch it, it's as magnificent, it's as
Yeah.
awe-inspiring. All the more so if it's a night pour, right? And you have
Yeah.
that the scattering of the embers across the dark sky of the night.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm not sure that I remember specifically the first time,
That's okay. That's okay.
but I have so many tremendous memories of various pours over the years.
Yeah. And then we come in every 2 years and like light the whole light the whole field on fire with I'm trying to think of some performances, the huge structure that Andrew Marsh and Margie Levine built in 2017 and then
Oh, it was
burned it to the
crazy.
ground, and there's the trebuchet to like
Yeah,
light the bonfire, and there's been um the hungry hippos with an iron ball, a cast iron hungry hippos ball, and I feel like also
the tetherball from 2017. Do you remember the circus year? Was that
yeah,
2017 or
yeah,
2019?
yeah, it
And
was
they had like the
17.
little tetherball thing revolving around, except instead of instead of soccer balls on the rope going around the pool, they were flaming orbs of
Yeah.
of something.
I remember there was also one year there was like it was kind of like a Rube Goldberg sort of they would tap the furnace and then as one little bucket filled with molten iron, it would tip
Mm-hmm.
down and fill another one, and then that would go back up and that one would tip down. And it's just like the things that, as an iron artist, when I try and tell my friends, it's like they're like, you're making this stuff up. This is insane, but you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of it, is that they're all so creative,
Yeah.
and so brilliant, and it's easy to become desensitized to quite how
Yeah.
creatively brilliant the artist community are, because we just assume they can build anything, right? I mean, anything they need, they fabricate on the fly, and
Yeah.
and interestingly, that's how old Sloss worked, right? A lot of the machine tools that they used
Yeah.
were so specialized that they fabricated them on site.
Yeah.
And now our crew perpetuate that behavior with their resourcefulness. I will tell a funny story from, I think it was 2017,
Yes, please do.
and and there was some, I'm sure there was a keg of beer there, but but it's legit. But
Yeah. Yeah. We've
but
got permits. Yeah.
yeah, but my wife likes her, I think it's Coronas, and
Yeah.
wanted to grab some, so we just zipped up 32nd Street to that little Walgreens down the street there, and
Mm-hmm.
got a 6-pack, and
Yeah.
they weren't twist offs.
Oh.
And Terry says, "Wait a minute, I need a bottle opener. I can't open this beer." And like 7 metal artists come up, and they each have a tool in their pocket that can.
Yeah.
And they're all so proud, right? Everyone's got some tool that they can, because they can do anything mechanically that is ever needed at any given
Yes.
moment.
Yes. And they've probably also all learned from experience, just don't use your teeth.
Yeah.
Don't. So they have the accoutrement to save them.
Yeah. And you do, you get a lot of fun stories out of that. And as an arts fan, I've always appreciated sculpture. You
Mhm.
can go back to, want to circle back to formative years. I don't know, maybe I absorbed some of this as a kid, but Philadelphia has the world's largest collection of Brancusi,
Oh,
of
okay.
Constantine Brancusi,
Yeah.
whose works are just very large scale, and often metal,
Hmm.
and I think just tremendous. And
Yeah.
um and you combine that with, I think, my other favorite artist is Duchamp.
Hmm.
Philadelphia Museum also has a tremendous Duchamp collection, including the original of the bride strip there by her bachelors,
Okay.
aka the large glass. And if you know the story of that paint, of that, right, it's done in the giant window frame,
Okay.
and it's got the fissure down the middle of the frame.
Okay.
When it was shipped for the Armory show, it was dropped, and that's how the fissure happened in the glass.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the curator asked Duchamp, "Should we replace the glass?" And he said, "No, now it's finished."
Wow. Yeah.
And right, kind of the quintessential Duchamp story, but that kind of organized chaos,
Yeah.
I think I also see very much evoked in the metal arts world.
Yeah.
We'll get back to our script here in a moment, but I do need to diverge for just one favorite story. So, one of the things I'm most proud of in my efforts at Sloss is advocating for the artists,
Hmm.
and formalizing that resident artist role.
Yeah.
For years, they had no insurance, and Paige and I worked to get workers' comp. So we did a lot of research and interviewed various firms, and finally get the guy to come out to the site. And he says, "So tell me exactly what they do." And I said, I walk him up to the apron of the foundry and
Hmm.
do the cupola of the furnace there. And I said, "Oh, man, you see this? They take this vessel here,
Hmm.
fill it with iron,
Hmm.
and then they inject a heating source in it to melt down that iron, and they heat it until it gets to 2,700 degrees, and then they ram that plug in, and then they pour it, and they catch it in this little bucket, and then they take that little bucket and they pour it into various molds. He says, I'm just going to check highest risk classification here.
Yeah, probably most appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, but sure enough, we were able to get workers' compensation insurance, and that was probably back in, oh, I don't know, late 2009, 2010. I mean, certainly later than it should have been for the danger of the work that the artists were undertaking.
Yeah.
And but to tell one add-on to that,
Mm-hmm.
this year we were able to add full medical, dental for our artists in residence for the first time.
Wow.
And not because they didn't deserve it, not because they didn't earn it, not because they didn't warrant it, but just because the budget wasn't there, and we really made it a priority to be able to provide.
That's amazing. And that is something that is, hopefully going forward, you're going to be leading the way for this kind of treatment of artists, how we deserve to, because if you think about everybody that has a 9-to-5 job, whether it's, I have a 9-to-5 job in an arts related field, I'm an art handler. And so I do have benefits, but like, that's what our society has deemed appropriate for a person to be provided from your employer. And so that's not always, even for other preparators, in New York City, they are, and I don't want to really speak too much about it because this isn't a podcast about art handlers and preparators, but there are art handlers that are not compensated with benefits. And then they get hurt on the job. Maybe they break their wrist trying to install a paint. Like, then they're done. And it's kind of been kind of a universal struggle for artists. So the fact that you advocated for it, made it happen, and are kind of seeing it through all the way to what it should be is very admirable. So thank you. And leading the way, hopefully, for the rest of everyone else. If it becomes a standard by more reputable organizations or more well-funded things, hopefully more will follow.
Yeah, and I would tell one of the reasons I stayed on the board of Sloss as long as I have, and why it's so important to me is, I mentioned I grew up in a big city, and I'll tie back to my real job. Because at Bankography, what we really specialize in doing is branching strategies for banks, so where they should open and close branches.
Okay.
And so we're very much demographers to the banking industry.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you see demographically, sociologically in America is what's referred to as the urban donut, which is an affluent suburban ring around a hollow urban core. Right? You're in St. Louis and right in Harvester and St. Peter's and Lake, whatever the hell its name is.
Oh, you're so good.
Yeah, I know. And then you circle down, and I can do this it's a little bit of a bar trick. I can do this for just about any city, right? And then you circle down to Festus and to Arnold on the south side, and to Carbondale, right? And the cities on the Illinois side, and right in there,
because Carbondale is a college.
Exactly.
So
college
the students
town.
Need bank. Yeah.
Wow. But those are all right, affluent, suburban, predominantly white communities that grew in the white flight eras, post-integration, 1960s, 70s, 80s, and left behind an urban core, right? And you think about Metro St. Louis, right? The core of St. Louis and Florissant and these inner communities there.
Wow.
No tax base, right? No property, but typically most cities fund their activities on property taxes.
Yeah.
And yet the cities were still asked to bear the infrastructure cost of the cultural amenities, right? Of the theater where the orchestra plays and the Broadway series plays, of the local art museum, of the zoo, of the parks, and no tax base to sustain that. So And Birmingham suffers terribly from that. There are 39 different municipalities in Jefferson County.
Mm-hmm.
So 39 different fire departments, police departments, mayor's offices. You ask why Nashville has thrived and Birmingham has not. Nashville Davidson County is basically one entity, or Jacksonville Duval County, Charlotte Mecklenburg County, right? They have what they call unigov, unitary government.
Okay.
And so it's a lot harder because the suburbs are farther out in other counties for them to sort of poach the most affluent residents, the most expensive houses.
Yeah.
And I very much believe that in order to have a vibrant metro area, you need a vibrant urban core.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You look at some of the folks all the way out there in St. Charles, and if St. Louis downtown fell into the Mississippi River, it'd be 3 years before they notice. Right? Because I don't go downtown. It's dangerous. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
right.
Or they'll go on
like,
a Sunday afternoon to the Fox Theater.
exactly. But then they're gone by, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, in Chicago, in the Fox River Valley, right? Naperville, Aurora. I mean, again, if Chicago fell into Lake Michigan and they wouldn't know that. They have their own cultural entities. They have their own minor league baseball teams they go cheer on. But I very much believe that for the entire region to thrive, the urban core has to thrive. And for the urban core to thrive, it needs strong cultural attractions.
Mm-hmm.
And Sloss Furnaces is very much that for Birmingham. And that fundamentally is why I'm so passionate about Sloss. Then I think about what Sloss's visitor sources are.
Yeah.
And you can tour the museum, but that's very static, right? That's a look at yesterday.
Yeah.
It's a look backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And you can come to a concert or a festival there.
Yeah.
And that's great fun, but it's here and it's gone.
Yeah.
And the metal artists are the enduring presence of Sloss. They are the living legacy of the Sloss story, right? They cast artistic iron using the same materials and methods and processes by which we cast industrial iron there a generation ago, or now maybe 2 generations ago.
Yeah.
But so they're the living tribute to all that happened at Sloss. They keep our heritage, our history as an iron making center alive and vibrant. And that's why that in a nutshell is why I find metal arts at Sloss so important, because it both preserves the history and it provides a creative impetus to draw people and to draw investment into the city center.
Yeah. And from our end, speaking as an artist and part of that community, that's one of the draws for me, and I'm sure many of the other people in the community, is that desire to carry on this tradition, or just to honor the early part of industry that was using this source of material and it to be there, because my day-to-day life, and I'm not exposed to that history and being around the buildings and the visual language of the just like the rivets and the rust, and there's something about it that when I go there, I'm so connected to it. And I don't get that really. I mean, I know there are other historic furnaces, but then also the event and being with my brothers and sisters in this iron tribe, and just so it's the history, but then it's also our community. But then when I think about when I first went to Sloss and the first conference, there was already a history there from the generations before me, and so they were all reminiscing about it too. And so it's this desire to carry on the history from when the furnace was, in production, but then also our earlier generations of metal artists and how they, became involved in using the grounds for our conference. It's so much, like, I was thinking about it. It's like every 2 years going to your favorite family reunion. That's what I feel like. And also it's like being in a resort that's you're the target audience for that resort. There's just, just so much that it means so much to all of us. And like I said, I can't remember if I've said it now since we've been recording or before we started recording, but every single person that I've interviewed on this podcast, and probably every single person that I will interview, has had a positive experience going to the Sloss conference. And we're just, now it's been 3 years, it's been 4 years since a lot of us has been there. Because of the pandemic, we had to do the online format, which I do think was a good decision based on what everything in society was going through. And, we had to keep our members safe. Like we couldn't.
It was the right decision.
It was. And we did the best we could. And everybody on that committee did a great job. But I'm so excited. and everybody that I talked, there's only been a few people that have been not like saying, oh, I'm not going to be able to go. And it's usually related to a master's degree exhibition. They have responsibilities for their degree, but everybody else, I'll see you at Sloss. That's like how we sign off on the podcast, like every single time. So
that is excellent. And yeah, we want to see, to all of you watching, we want to see all of you. And to the professors, bring your students, and to the practicing artists, bring your friends. And I mentioned how we had one little gallery that begat another little gallery downtown, that begat an art walk that suddenly caused people to take note of all the historic buildings in the warehouse district and the loft district. And downtown Birmingham is now a really cool place. So, and we have restaurants, and we have little theaters, and we have breweries, and so yes, I encourage everybody, come and avail yourself of the city. There's fun things to do. There's been tremendous transformation over the past 10 or 15 years in our community, and Sloss has been a huge part of that. It was actually Ira Hill who pointed out to me, first raised the observation that Sloss was really one of the original creative class venues in downtown Birmingham. Right? That in the early days, there were artists who would just sort of gather there impromptu on the weekend for work sessions. I have a colleague who I won't name, who used to, before it was open as a museum, she and friends would break in after hours, armed with either a camera or a sketchbook, and maybe a few beverages, and just enjoy and appreciate the site, right? That same artistic energy that you alluded to, that everybody now can derive legally.
Yes.
You don't even have to hop a fence. You don't have to look for that opening in the chain link anymore to get onto the site. And yeah, we're thrilled with the chance to host everybody back at Sloss again. I will also point out, though, that we're not a cicada.
Explain that. Can you elaborate on that for me?
Yeah, so the cicada shows up every 17 years, right?
Okay,
It goes back into its little shell, and we don't hear from it for another 17 years. We're not a cicada with a 2-year life cycle, folks. We're open every day. We have ball nights once a month. We are bringing back workshop weekend, where artists of any level, from beginner to expert, can come take classes and workshops. And we have visiting artist residencies, and we can talk a little bit more in detail about that. But and even if you just have that special large project that your home foundry can't handle, we just poured, thanks to our friend Miranda at the Atlanta Beltline Project. Sent a couple of big commissions our way, big castings, the Tolly Sticks and the Big Bear project that you guys will learn more about when you come visit in April there. And yeah, we invite the whole Metal Arts program. We love to see you every 2 years, but don't be a stranger in those in-between times. Come see us anytime.
Absolutely. Anytime you're driving through. Anytime. Yeah.
Anytime you're driving through.
Or the destination.
Exactly. And we have We can do programs for a professor who wants to bring a dozen students, and we kind of have the framework outlined of what like a weekend workshop would look like, right? We'll do this on Friday night, we'll start our design and elements, and on Saturday we'll do our pouring, and Sunday we'll do our finishing, right? That type. And again, I'm not an expert enough to know the individual components, but that type of programming.
Yeah, what you just described sounds very enticing.
Yeah, and we're trying to do more and more of that. And I personally have a vision for Sloss for Sloss Metal Arts.
Yeah.
That has been adopted in our strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
That I can sum up for you in 4 words.
Okay.
Pilchuck of metal arts.
Mm-hmm. I know what you're talking about. But to clarify, Pilchuck is a glass school. It's like the premier, because I'm not a glass artist.
You're absolutely. And it was started by Dale Chihuly and his crew in Seattle.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
As a single summer program years ago, and it has evolved into the epicenter of glass art in America.
Yeah.
And the Glass Museum in downtown Seattle is now the 3rd most visited tourist attraction in all of Seattle, behind only the Space Needle and the Pike Place Market.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you see there what an arts program can do for a city.
Yeah.
But then also what it offers to artists. And our vision is for Sloss to become that national repository for the metal arts, and a place where you can see metal arts work on display. And toward that end, we're installing a new sculpture garden. We have a great grant from the Alabama State Council on the Arts to help fund a sculpture garden.
Yeah.
We're going to be displaying more and more of our permanent collection at different places throughout the site.
Yeah.
And so, it's a place to see art. It's a place for artists to work.
Yeah.
A place to learn about arts. And again, any level from beginner to expert. And again, we really hope to foster that environment where Sloss becomes kind of the clearinghouse for all metal arts nationwide. We have the facility, we have the history. We're one of the few places where you can pour iron in a one-time iron foundry.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's distinctive, that we think really gives us some leverages and some advantages. I would tell you I think it was in 2017, and this was just an idea kicking around in the corner of my mind and Marshall's mind, Marshall Christie, director at the time, that we should have a visiting artist program where artists could come and spend a few weeks at Sloss.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to just make a commitment, figure it out along the way.
Sometimes.
So at the 2017 conference, when I gave my welcome remarks, I said, and we are adding visiting artist residencies. And later that week, one of the artists, I think it was John Stewart Jackson, was like, Steve, like 15 people have asked me about when we're starting those. And so we did, and we got some funding from the State Arts Council for it. And now every year we have 2. We have a spring and a fall visiting artist.
Awesome.
And 4 weeks at Sloss, working with our artists. Artist receives a $500 stipend.
Oh, wow.
Their facilities, all of your materials. The artist has to do an exhibition at the end of their body of work and leave behind a signature work for us to stay as part of our collection. But again, that really helps us. Our artists learn from the visiting artist. The visiting artist learns from our artist, gets to use our facilities. And again, it helps build this mutually reinforcing community of metal artists. And while I promise I don't want to be the prop guy, and this is going to be tough to do on camera, but from our very first visiting artist, this was Gwen Yen Chu. And you know
Yes.
Gwen from the conference, and
I
Gwen,
do. I'm actually just talking to her right now about getting her on the podcast. So this
oh,
is a
Gwen is
work.
amazing. This is her work from her with some fishing wire that Marshall donated to the cause here.
Yeah.
And I wish I could show it in better perspective, but it's kind of heavy to hold up because it's
Oh
like
yeah. Yeah.
a 18-inch tall cast iron piece. But Gwen was one of our first visiting artists. She had just graduated from Art Institute of Chicago at the time, and just an amazing talent. We've had so many great. Oh my God, there's a piece that Willie Reeves did that I just covet, that
Yeah.
bronze with this neon, and we. So anyhow, I I don't let me get too infatuated with speaking about all the wonderful artists who have passed through Sloss, but yeah, this we want you to visit, and to all the artists out there, come take our residencies. We're looking at adding a third residency. We're looking at expanding the time to 6 weeks, and
Yeah.
all with good time and budget.
That's fantastic. And like everything, they always say Pilchuck wasn't built in a day, or is it? It's Rome. It's Rome, right? It's Rome. Rome wasn't built in a day, but it sounds like you're well on your way. When they started having these conferences, more, I think, from the educational side, to kind of everybody come together and they bring their furnace and they demonstrate, well, this is what I've learned, and this is what, oh, I think if maybe you tweaked that. And so to learn and bring their students and be exposed, and now you're building it. I can see it happening, and I'm excited to see what more can come. But it's not going to just happen in a day.
It isn't, but one of the things I want you to look at when you get to Birmingham
Yeah.
is across 32nd Street,
Uh-huh.
outside of the Sloss site, right? 32nd Street is that main street that you enter off of.
Yes.
Keep in mind, Sloss was huge in its operating days,
Yeah.
and it was very much a company town.
Yeah.
There were about 12 square blocks of workers' housing. All that remains now, and interesting, the workers' housing, it sounds like altruistic, right? Oh yeah, they provided housing for their workers, but in reality, Karen Oots, our recently retired executive director and curator,
Yeah.
explained to me that one of the reasons why the workers' housing was built is because Sloss ran 24 hours a day, and it was quite dangerous, and fires would break out.
Mm.
The workers' housing was there close by because when the fires would break out, they needed a crew
Yeah.
close at hand who could respond very quickly.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but all that remains of the workers' housing complex today are three buildings: the commissary,
Mm-hmm.
the infirmary, and the power vault.
Okay.
And you can see those buildings, they're just north of the viaduct on 32nd Street. We have gotten permission to repurpose those as metal art space.
Wow. Yeah,
And it's a long-term project, but the
for
old
sure.
vault is going to be residences. So an
Mm.
artist in residence can really be resident, and a
Yes.
visiting artist can stay on site at Sloss. There's going to be 2 apartment units there. The
Fantastic.
commissary is going to be gallery space, and then artist workshop and studio space,
Yeah.
possibly space to add whether it's some digital work or some photography space, so we can just capture images of our works better. And the ground floor, though, is going to be for dirty work, if you will. Like, it's
Yeah.
designed to have like Heather helped us design, it's going to have like a drain in the floor, so that you can, and big old industrial sinks, so that the artists aren't washing up in the
Yeah.
regular lavatory sinks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That's
I mean,
all
it's
good
designed for that
stuff.
kind of mold making and
Yeah.
all of that kind of, yeah. And you'll see we've got a neat coming soon rendering image
Okay.
on the building for what it's going to look like. And again, that's a long term, but yeah, I mean, really investing more in studio space for the artists is, I
Yeah.
think, our next big initiative on this road to creating this really pure epicenter of metal arts and
Yeah.
at Sloss. During our strategic planning process, one of the folks helping us with strategic planning asked, and she said, "Yeah, how often can your crew pour?" And I think back to something Ira told me, which is, if you don't love pouring iron more than anything else in the world, then you're in the wrong place. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and the thought, and again, we're not doing this tomorrow or anything, but the
Right.
thought is, how cool would it be if Sloss Furnaces was so popular that we had a pour every day
Yeah.
that was like at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, where everybody gathers for the fountain show, or
Yeah.
the electrical parade at Disney.
Yeah. At the
It
end of the
was,
day. Yeah.
yeah, that
Or
granted.
whatever time of day, but yeah.
Well, and when I'll show my generation here, but I think of the electrical parade, and I think of the lyric from Tragic Kingdom that, serves no real purpose, takes up lots of juice just to impress us, which is before she was a judge on The Voice. Gwen Stefani actually had a really cool band called No Doubt
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Anaheim, California, typical suburban community,
Uh-huh.
and the entire first album of No Doubt is lamenting sort of the suburbia and of course that's where Disneyland was, right? The original
Yeah.
Disneyland, and yeah, so there was that line in Tragic Kingdom about the electrical parade. And but I mean, but that was the big deal at Disney, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody would line up to see the parade, and what
Yeah.
if it's Sloss?
Yeah.
Everybody lined up to see
The poor.
the poor at 3 o'clock every afternoon, right? The whistle blows, or the
Yeah.
bell rings, and it's iron pour time.
Yeah. I'd go. I'd
Yeah,
go.
exactly.
Yeah. I think
Get your scratch blocks in, right?
yeah. 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 Work on it tonight for tomorrow's
Yeah,
pour. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, again, just that, right? How soon do they queue up before dusk at the Bellagio to watch those fountains change
Yeah.
colors?
Yeah.
And that's so, yeah, arts are going to be front and center. We have a new branding marketing campaign that
Mhm.
it has the greatest slogan in the world. And
Yeah.
I can't tell you yet.
Okay. Okay.
But
I
it will
won't
be
push.
ready by the conference. So I
Okay.
want to build a little bit of anticipation
Okay.
for it.
All right.
But it's the coolest.
I
And
can't wait. I
and,
can't
and
wait.
metal arts front and center.
Fantastic. I'm so excited. I'm so grateful that I got a chance to talk to you and really learn all of this stuff. And I'm excited that I'm going to be able to share it with everybody that's listening. So thank you so much. I just can't even tell you enough. Thank you.
Oh, certainly. I'm so pleased for the opportunity to be a booster for Sloss and for the city of Birmingham, and to be able to share our story and to invite everybody to join. And look, there's been some changes since you've last visited. We have a lot of new faces. We have our new program director, Lindsay.
Yes.
Christina. Lindsay's great. You've had the chance she's a longtime veteran of Birmingham nonprofit and arts organizations. We have formalized the residency program. It used to be you'd be an artist in residence kind of until you got tired of it. And now we've actually formalized them. And so they are mostly on 2-year and 3-year staggered terms.
Okay.
So we don't all turn over at once.
Yeah.
But we'll have application periods. So to all of you listening, follow our website, follow our Instagram feed, because those calls and I think most everyone is on that email list, right? And you'll get the calls for visiting artist submission, call for resident artist submission. We're going to have one of our RAs, Emmy Keenan, who came to us from Kennesaw State, where she studied under Alan Peterson. Emmy's term is up at the end of June, and you'll meet also in April our foundry manager, Odette, and Odette came to us from Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay. Yeah.
Our residents, Alexandra, attended the conference in Berlin. You may have had a chance to meet there if you had a chance to attend that.
I didn't get a chance to go, but yeah.
Alexandra attended I'm going to get the American Institute of Indian Arts in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, and then worked at the Crucible in Berkeley, which is kind of one of our peer foundries.
Yeah.
Before joining us. Emmy, I mentioned, came over from Kennesaw. Sam Horowitz has his degree, his undergrad from Bard and his MFA from Alfred, and joined us. And then the one face you will recognize, our longtime stalwart, the amazing, super talented Ajane.
Yes.
And one of Ajane's turtle forms, he does the most fantastic lifelike forms, and
so much movement, and
such a brilliant young guy. And Ajane joined us as part of our summer youth apprenticeship as a high school student in Birmingham, and never left. And he is now in collections across the Southeast, his works. and then Virginia Elliott,
Mm-hmm.
who is on the conference play, is at the Metals Museum, is moving to Birmingham this week,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
yes, and will become a full time member of our crew. So
Fantastic.
yes, so you'll have some familiar faces,
Yeah.
some, yeah, certainly in Ajanea's continuity to the former crew, and Virginia from past conferences, and I think Alexandra has attended some of the prior conferences, and then some of the other crew are brand new, but they're all fantastic. They do amazing works at the Holiday Iron Pour.
Mm-hmm.
We went gift shopping, and everybody on our list got a different work of art from a different Sloss artist because they're just all that amazing and talented.
It's really quite the lineup as you describe it, really is.
Yeah.
So congratulations on having all of that come together and developing the program. And it's really going to be a great resource for our community, for people to be able to come in, be supported, be able to work in the field and get real world experience being an artist, and also having a supportive place to work. It's just really great to see it's all
But
developing. Yeah.
and those, that term structure, and really I need to give credit to Heather Holmes and and Ira Hill, who really, when Marshall departed, and
Yeah.
Marshall had been there like 7 years, and Marshall and John Stewart Jackson revived the program from nothing, from
Mm-hmm.
a point where all the artists had been eliminated and the
Yeah.
residency program, and those two, I mean, just can't say enough for what they did to, but labor of love and taxing, and they reached the point where it's time to move on.
Yeah. That's okay.
And Marshall departed. John Stewart had already left. Marshall left about maybe 6 weeks before the last conference,
Mm-hmm.
so the virtual one.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I called the most knowledgeable person about metal arts that I knew, which was Heather, and said, Heather, can you join us as interim director, get us through the program, get us through the conference? Of course, she did an amazing job and
Yeah.
came off seamlessly, even in that virtual format. Um, Dave Matson was another one who worked really, helped lead us through that
Yeah.
transition program. But one of the, but I really give a Ira and Heather and Julie Ward, who was a former Sloss resident artist and this year's conference director. Also, they helped draft the job descriptions for the resident artists and for the program director. Really helped put those procedures and processes in place. And the reason why the fixed terms are so important is because we don't want you here forever. We want you to show up, spend a couple of years, learn,
Mm-hmm.
and then graduate and move on to that MFA class that you want to take, or to open your own studio, or to a residency at SAW or Penland or Metals Museum, or right, or somewhere else in our community. We want you
Yes.
to learn something, leave some knowledge behind along the way, and then clear out and make room for somebody else. And so to all of you listening, yeah, watch our residency calls, because every year there will be opening positions turning over as residents work through their specified terms.
Yeah. And I think that we see that in many different really successful art and craft programs. We see it at Penland. I think also, or I know the Metal Museum, the National Ornamental Metal Museum, they have apprentices, is what they call that position, but it's a 2-year term where you come, you're there for 2 years, work full time, and then and live on the residence. It's very similar, and it's really, I think, a great format. And then you go on to spread the love at the next stop.
Yeah, and I knew as a board member that we wanted to formalize the program, but
Yeah.
I don't know a shot blaster from a, I don't know, from a whatever, from a flux capacitor.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And so, but knew the right people. And again, that's
Yes.
why I give such credit to Ira and Heather and Julie,
Yeah.
who have familiarity with those programs
Yeah.
and how to optimally run that, and who really just led, just, I just can't thank them enough for all that they, and it's neat to me. I think that underscores a theme of just the continuity of this metal arts community,
Yeah.
how everyone's a lifer. They all circle back. Joe McCreary, right, who was one of
Yeah.
our long ago Joe drops by and helps out with pours, and he and his wife Holly, who I think they met at Sloss, if I recall, and right, and so many folks who've been through the program, John Stewart as well, right? John Stewart Jackson, so many folks who've been through the program over the years, and they all return to lend their support and to the next generation of artists. It's great to see. It's inspiring.
And it's great to see someone like you taking what we need seriously, actually listening to Heather and Ira and Julie and what is needed, because that doesn't always happen. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You guys are the heartbeat of it. Artists are what make it happen. So we've got to support them.
Let's see. I want to make sure that we're not missing anything, because I do want to get on over to the after show, because it is a school night. I don't know what your work schedule is, but I don't want to keep you unnecessarily.
I'm a night owl,
Okay.
and you'll have to stop me, because I will say good things about Sloss and Metal Arts as long as you wish.
Oh no, we may be matched in that. Well,
Yeah.
Let's see. So we talked about so much, and you definitely elaborated on what you love most about Sloss and the iron casting community. So we want to do the hot on the horizon, which you may have covered quite a bit of that, but is there anything else related to Sloss iron casting that you wanted to talk about? Did we want to talk about the lights?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this is something that I have been aware of, and it was on the website too, that we could donate to the cause. And so you were relighting Sloss for the World Games. Did I get that right?
yeah, correct. And so for those who don't know, the World Games is an Olympic-like event put on by the International Olympic Committee for sports that are not quite yet at the Olympic level.
Mm-hmm.
And Birmingham was chosen to host the World Games in 2021, in the same cycle that would have the Olympics in Tokyo in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Well, COVID happened.
Yeah.
And the Olympics in 2020 turned to 2021. And so that moved the World Games to 2022. And it has an array of kind of wacky sports. But at Sloss, we were chosen to host sport climbing, and they built this 50-foot tall rock climbing wall. It was tremendously cool. Beach handball, break dancing, some of the other venues, we had sumo wrestling here in the city. That was one of the most popular sports. And we had tug of war as a sport. Certain rollerblading, skateboarding, and there were just again an array of events that you possibly never even heard of, or something called core football.
Okay.
Yeah, just look it up. I mean,
Okay.
they're kind of wacky, but everyone but anyhow, big event. I don't remember how many countries were represented, but many. I mean, I'm sure close to 100 nations here.
And probably all the athletes very high caliber, even though it's not the Olympics. If it's Olympic-esque, then I'm sure they're professionals.
Certainly the top tier in their specific disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
So for years, one of our board members, Kathy Sloss Jones, and Kathy is a descendant of James Withers Sloss, who was the founder of Sloss Furnaces.
Wow.
Although he sold it soon after founding it. Mm-hmm. But I believe that's Kathy's grandfather's grandfather. And her dad was a board member, and may he rest in peace. He was her dad was actually one of the people, her mom and dad were some of the civic leaders who led the delegation to Washington that got funding from the National Park Service to transform Sloss into a museum versus knocking it down.
Wow.
But Kathy always had this vision of lighting Sloss.
Yeah.
That we need lights, right? You drive by at night, you don't see anything.
Yeah.
And last May of 2020, at a board meeting, And again, kind of like the visiting artist thing, right? If you say it, it has to happen. And I
Yeah.
said, what, Kathy? I said, we're never going to have a better opportunity than World Games.
Yeah.
So let's go for it.
Okay.
So basically we had 13 months, right? It was May of 2021 that we made this decision.
Yeah.
World Games was coming at the end of June 2022. And we had some tremendous support from the Alabama Tourism Department financially. We had some good support from some corporate partners, and we had a lot of grassroots individual donations. We raised about $250,000. And now when everybody visits us for the Cast Iron Conference, you're going to see the site is bathed in this dramatic light that illuminates the stacks and the water tower and the boilers. And we can program it to change so you can be green for St. Patrick's Day and pink for Breast Cancer Awareness Month and
Yeah.
Pride Week in multicolor rainbow colors and just the realm of the World Games had a blue and green as their colors, and so we just had rotating blue and green for when the World Games were here. We had a dramatic. We couldn't have a big celebration for the lighting because all the construction was already ongoing for the World Games.
Yeah.
We just had a small event with about 200 people that Mayor Woodfin flipped the switch, and of course, just another testament to our crew, our amazing crew. We're thinking, how's this going to look? And okay, we need a switch to flip. So sure enough, I go back to the metal artists. I'm like, guys, I need a giant light switch.
Yeah.
And sure enough, next thing you know, I come back and there's like Sam and Alexandra, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got a light switch for you," and it's got one of these big old like toggle switches on it.
Oh
And
yeah, they'll like
exactly, and so the mayor, he said, and our mayor again, he's great, and but he knows how to work the crowd, and he said, "This is always better." He said, "I don't want to flip this switch. This is always better with kids." So any little kids, I mean, you come here and flip this switch with me. So everyone has little kids. The kids come up there, and of course, someone's on a cell phone to the guy from the lighting company in the visitor center.
Yeah.
And we count 3, 2, 1, and they flip the switch and the lights come on and it's dramatic and anyhow you'll be thrilled with how it looks. It's fantastic.
I can't wait. I mean, so it's funny. I don't know. I'm sure that you know this because we all come and every 2 years we buy the sweatshirts and we buy the t-shirt that has the, the blueprint of the furnace,
Right.
that one, and
I
so,
love that view.
I've got my hat. And so wherever we go, if I go to a conference in Memphis or if I was just at a conference in South Dakota, people are repping Sloss stuff.
Excellent.
At those conferences, hands down. It's kind of like it's our wear. It's what we wear. But also I wear this around town in St. Louis and I'll buy shirts for my husband. He's got the green one that's from industry to arts.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go somewhere. So we were at the City Museum in St. Louis and somebody came up to us and said, "Oh, you're wearing a Birmingham shirt." And then they'll tell us because the outline of Sloss, that skyline, I mean, many of us in the community have tattoos of that skyline because it means so much, but it's noticeable everywhere you go. So that was at the City Museum in St. Louis. Somebody just came up and talked to us because my husband was wearing this Sloss shirt. We were in Branson, Missouri, and on a showboat on the top deck during the intermission, somebody came up and asked us about the Sloss shirt that my husband was wearing. It's like no matter where you go, that skyline is so memorable. And so to be able to see it at night is very meaningful. Is like I applaud everything that went into that. And I'm so excited to see it.
Yeah, it was a tremendous night. And one of the neater things, Brandon Wilson, who is president of our board on the city side, that landmark board that I mentioned, shared a photo. He said, "This is it. How great to see." Well, you have to think back that generations ago, people would pull over on the First Avenue Viaduct to watch Sloss, just the cauldron of smoke and fire and when it was in its operating days.
Yeah.
And so Brandon took a photo of people who had pulled over on the viaduct and were having their photo taken along the re-illuminated Sloss. And he said,
Oh.
"Look, this is it." He said, we've recaptured that magic
Yeah.
of people seeing Sloss lit at night, and yeah, it adds so much to that imagery. It's a photographer's dream to see it in those colors. And by the way, you talk about those. I mentioned we have a cool new slogan that I can't divulge yet.
Nope.
We
Nope.
also have a new logo, and the new
Okay.
logo, which we can divulge,
Okay.
because that's now public.
Okay.
But it uses the same iconic font
Okay.
that's on the water tower of the
Oh,
Sloss logo there. And so now all of the Sloss t-shirts and merchandise are going to carry that font for the Sloss logo that mimics what's on the water tower.
beautiful. I love that idea.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it. Oh my gosh. It's coming up soon.
It's April 5th through 8th.
I know.
Everybody get registered and
Yes.
make your travel plans, and
Yeah.
you can camp on the site and have access to the facilities as much as you need. And of course you can be inspired by your community of fellow artists. You mentioned that it was like the biggest family reunion, and it is, because one of the things people tell me is that they run into folks that they haven't seen since the last cast iron conference,
Yeah.
and they pick up their conversation like mid-sentence where they left off 2 years ago, which to me is sort of the ultimate way of telling how someone is a true dear friend of yours.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Where time gaps just instantaneously disappear.
Yeah.
I have to share one fun conference story
Okay.
here.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so one year they had the trebuchet going,
Hmm.
and
Let's see. So let's see it. So this is Adam Bodine and Forrest Millsap made that in 2013, I think, or 2015, but I think it was 2013. Anyways,
yeah,
it
and
was the
again,
one day trebuchet. They made it in.
yeah. You mentioned Adam and Forrest
Yeah.
and Garrett as well, and again, the continuity. We still see them at Sloss and
Yeah.
helping out with programs and things, and again, that it's such a legacy.
Yeah.
It's such a legacy community there. But so they had the trebuchet going, and sure enough, we get calls
Oh no.
from the police department that, "Hey, what's going on there? They say Sloss is on fire." Nah, that's just metal artists having
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
And so then the subsequent year, when you talked about the giant maze that Andrew and
Hmm.
Margie developed,
Yes.
we we actually called the fire department and notified them ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Just so you know.
Yeah, just so you know, we're going to be setting a lot of things on fire
Yeah.
on Wednesday night,
Yeah.
and when people call, because they drive by that viaduct on First
Oh
Avenue.
yeah. Yeah. And they're worried and they don't know. And that's
Well,
okay.
by the way, meet Thorsten here. He just hopped up in my lap. Say hi, Thor. He was a rescue of an abandonment in our neighborhood,
Oh.
and so he came with the name Thor, but we gave him the name Thorsten to kind of class it up a little bit.
Yeah. Thorsten. Yeah.
There's a famous economist named Thorsten Veblen.
Okay.
Okay. So he just hopped up into my lap here mid podcast, and
Yeah. I love it when animals show up. It gives it a little bit of a light, a
yeah,
light air to it.
exactly. He's a good little fella.
Yeah. So let's okay, I asked you about the lights. That was one thing. Is there anything else that we wanted to cover? I mean, is there anything else hot on the horizon or did we exhaust that?
Well, I hope we address that, but I'll just reiterate again: the visiting artist residencies, the workshop weekends are going to be returning in to us here in 2023. We're going to be undertaking all kinds of facility improvements, and particularly with an eye toward artist studio space and such, and of course the Cast Iron Conference is going to be front and center here before you know it. So
I know. I'm so excited. And I'm excited to see. I mean, I keep reiterating, I don't know if I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but I'm so excited that these programs, you're being able to ramp them up and really solidify important terms that really, artists need this support to be able to continue our creative work and, help out developing areas with their creativity and helping communities grow.
I'm going to do a little bit of a commercial here again, as if this hadn't been one giant commercial, but I do want to mention one other thing about our residency program. So it's designed to have about a 80-20 split during a typical 40-hour work week.
Okay.
Of work for Sloss versus work on the artist's own behalf. And so for any given week, we're always trying to allocate 8 to 10 of those 40 hours are for studio time. Now, the artists have run of the site 24 hours. So you can work in your studio above and beyond that. But yeah, that's the way. So we're kind of structured that, you're going to spend 30 or so hours a week as a resident artist, whether that's working on commissions that were projects we're commissioned to produce.
Yeah.
Or items for our gift shop, or the demonstration tours that we do for the school, and the tour groups, or leading a workshop. But yeah, we try to allocate 8 to 10 hours a week for you just to be in your studio, whether that's doing conceptual work or the design work or the execution or the mold making. We have, and I forget what the number is, but there's a monthly sand and iron allotment.
Okay, yeah.
That comes with the salaried position.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and so we encourage. I know I'm sure a lot of the folks who tune in with the podcast are the professor tier.
Maybe.
So we'd encourage you to really share the opportunities with your students.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you're professional artists and maybe you already have your own studio set up and you're at the point of your career where you wouldn't uproot to come to Sloss but you've got that intern, that helper in your studio who you think this would be a great opportunity for them to round out their skills. And by all means.
Yeah. Tell all your friends.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like it's come a long way, and it's going to be really a great resource for our community. Absolutely.
It's come a long way, but it's built on so many tremendous efforts and we've named a lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of them today, obviously, folks like Heather and Joe McCreary and John Stewart Jackson and Ira and the Millsaps and there's just and Julie and I mean there's so many, and I feel bad that I'm sure I'm and Remy was one of our great artists for years, and the young kid whose name I can't even remember, but who moved to Europe, and I mean we've had so many.
Oh yeah,
Jack, I think his name was.
Yeah.
And even our more recent crew of some of the ones who've rotated out of.
And Savannah.
Christopher and Savannah. Savannah's up at the Metals Museum now in Memphis.
And that
Ashley, who was.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's it. And, and that's how I'm so proud, Savannah. So.
Yeah.
You're going to bring a tear to my eye. She's
doing great up there. I mean, she really.
Amazing talent. And she, like Ajane, came to us in our summer youth apprenticeship program.
Right.
She started as a high school student with us. And that's exactly how we envisioned the program, right? Savannah spent a couple of years at Sloss, moved on to Metals Museum. Mm-hmm. Ashley Wingo spent a couple of years at Sloss, is taking her MFA now at University of Georgia.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that. Okay, great.
Yeah. And so, just again, we've had so many great folks through there over the years who have given so much to get the program, to prepare it for where it is today. And I have told our current group of artists, I hope you will look back on this 2 years later and say, well, damn, we didn't have that.
Oh,
because I want them to look back and, say, hey, it was good when I was there. It's even better now. And that each successive group leaves something behind to to prepare it for the next generation of artists.
Yeah. And I'm sure it will. Great things to come. I'm so happy. I'm so excited. It's very, very encouraging.
Well, thanks for all you do to promote us to the broader national community.
Man, I just want the big family to come together. I mean, it's going to be so great in continuing, and it's been growing. We've pretty much covered what's hot on the horizon, but I'd love to hear if you have any advice for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing I would say to the group that I'd love to mention is that one of the reasons why we were able to make it through the pandemic is because of the support of the National Endowment for the Arts. And we received 2 COVID relief grants during the pandemic. We received a $100,000 grant through the American Rescue Plan.
Mm-hmm.
Following the pandemic, the American Rescue Plan allocated dollars specifically to the National Endowment for the Arts to help arts organizations, not just visual arts, but visual arts, performing arts, musical arts, get restarted after the pandemic. And that's what gave us the fiscal confidence to be able to bring on our 3rd and 4th resident artists and the reservoir of funds with which to do that. And these things matter. And it's easy as an artist to maybe live in an artistic bubble, not aware of the world. I would encourage everybody, be politically active. We come from a state in Alabama here. We have 9 representatives in Congress, right? 7 reps and 2 senators.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly one of them voted for the American Rescue Plan. And that was our magnificent, wonderful Terry Sewell, who represents us here in Birmingham. And all the others thought, nah, arts, not work. I mean, and everything that was in the American Rescue Plan was a lot more than that. But yeah, these things matter. And yeah, read your newspapers and get involved and be active at our summer youth apprenticeship. At our closing reception, I actually was asked to give some remarks. And one of the things I said to your parents, I said, it is so easy. Just send an email to your state house representative to say, my child took the summer youth apprenticeship at Sloss Furnaces, had a great time. Thank you for supporting the Alabama State Council on the Arts. That's all it needs to be, an email of just 2 sentences. But you know what? Their staffers, they tally these and they say, wow, I had 7 parents write me that said, State Arts Council was doing good things.
Yeah. Sloss Metal Arts. Yeah.
These things matter. And we'd have been in dire circumstances through the pandemic if we didn't have that fiscal support from the State Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts under the American Rescue Plan.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thanks to our governmental resources. And again, everybody get out there and advocate for those representatives and senators who are willing to support the arts.
Thank you for sharing that information.
And this is advice I will offer particularly to young artists, because I'm an entrepreneur. I own a small business that's actually now a pretty good sized business, and we have clients across the country. And I'd give a couple of pieces of advice. Yeah, every artist is also an entrepreneur, right? If you are not a employed resident artist at a place like Sloss, for example, then and even if you are, you're probably working for your own portfolio on the side. But I'd encourage you, if you have an idea and really want to start a business as an artist, do so early when you don't have obligations. There's a thought that says you should wait until I'm safe, right? Let me build up a nest egg and then I have something to fall back on if I fail. But as you go through life, you assume obligations, and obligations tend to be inhibitors. When I started our company, one of the reasons why I could do that is because I knew that all I needed to do was earn enough money to feed myself and the cat.
Yeah.
Right. And as long as I could earn enough to feed me and feed Tiger, and Tiger was a predecessor many years before Thorsten and Lola, the current cats.
Yeah.
But, yeah, as long as and there have been some great dogs in there along the way too. But yeah, as long as I could earn that there wasn't a lot of risk of failure. And so to any artist who's interested in going out on their own, yeah, now's the time while you're young. Don't wait until you're bound with a mortgage or a family, because then those are obligations and And the burden of what you need to meet is going to be a lot greater than just feeding yourself and the cat.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd encourage you to do that. The other thing that I'd encourage is that as an artist, this is a tough thing to think about from an artist because it's such a custom field. But there's only so many hours in the day. And our company, we provide both consulting services and a software tool. And the beauty of the software is that we can sell the same software tool over and over again, right, to different people. Replicability is a beautiful thing because the incremental cost is near nil. So even while you're thinking about these great custom works and large commissions, think about, is there some bread and butter kind of standard piece you can produce, right, from standard molds that's easily replicable, that generates a floor, an ongoing revenue source that kind of pays the basic bills, and then you let the large scale commissions really, take you to that next level from an earnings perspective. So a little business advice from the artist who probably generally just think on the creative sides of their brain.
That's great. And I've seen artists that are probably didn't hear it from you, but figured it out along the way. Like, I think that that's good, solid advice. And I've witnessed people that are doing that. And so it's really great that you highlight it for our up and comers. And also, it's never too late. It's never too late to figure it out.
No, absolutely. But yeah, there's the term starving artist, right? But you don't need to be, and we don't want you to be.
No. Yeah.
And some of that involves just learning a bit about a bit about the business side. In fact, even one of the things that we've asked Lindsay, our program director, to implement for our residents is just a couple of times a year to have a knowledge talk where somebody comes in, and maybe it's an experienced local sculptor, to just say, here's some tips and tricks for you. Because again, we want the residents who come to Sloss to leave with a little bit more. I mean, I asked the group the last time we all had a chance to gather, and I said, what's the benefit of incorporating? And nobody could answer.
Yeah. I don't even know off the top of my head.
Yeah. And the answer is that a corporation is a separate legal entity from you personally. Mm-hmm. So when you install that giant 6-foot sculpture in somebody's backyard and it falls over and hits somebody in the head,
yeah,
they can attack the assets of the corporation, but they can't take your house from you.
Yes. And that's an important point.
Yeah. And there's different kinds of corporate. There's LLCs and there's professional corporations, and these have different implications and benefits. And there's lots of things like that artists should know, but that they naturally don't know because they didn't go to business school. They went to art school. Yeah. And so to the extent that we can bring in people who've trod that path before, mm-hmm. be it a gallery, or a gallery owner who can say, here's how to photograph your work to make sure that you're positioned best to get into a gallery. Here's a preparator who might say, here's how best to hang your work to exhibit it for maximal effectiveness.
Yeah.
We need to provide that kind of, whether in the business aspects of art, to prep young artists for going into their careers.
Yeah. Or here's how to think about how are you going to pack it to ship it so that wherever you're shipping it to, they can hang it on a wall with a cleat that you've provided. Maybe throw some wall anchors in there so it doesn't fall on that 3-year-old. Yeah. Like, that's great.
Oh, exactly. And it's funny you mentioned that because Lindsay often brags that Odette, our foundry manager, was like a savant of packing crates.
Oh, good.
And writing, and could just build these. In fact, when we shipped an exhibit to Berlin for the international conference, and the crew had to devise the appropriate packing materials, right? And these are things you don't think about in the execution, but that are absolutely critically important. The literal nuts and bolts of
because it's definitely stuff that I learned a lot in school. But then I worked for the St. Louis Art Museum for almost 5 years. But that's when I learned about crates. That's where I learned about how to make a slipcase, So it's not necessarily stuff that we're taught in school, but it's stuff that we need to know. So that's going to be, good thing to like do and be on the lookout for as an artist. But then also that's great that you're bringing it through to help the residents get exposed to it. So, all right. So I'm wanting to go on over to the after show because I have been dying to ask you about the tornado year, and it's just something that I love hearing everybody's different stories about that. But did we cover everything? I don't want to miss anything. I think we did a good job.
I certainly hope so. We've had an expansive discussion and I hope I've gotten people excited for the conference and for Sloss Metal Arts and shared some of the vision of it going forward of what we're aspiring to do there.
Yeah. And I mean, I think everybody already is excited, but I hope everybody comes. I think that now, well, this is going out probably a couple of weeks from now,
Right.
This interview, but everything is probably, applied to be in the exhibition. The workshops have been announced. There's scholarships for travel. There's scholarships for students. There's volunteers. As a steering committee member, the conference doesn't happen without the volunteers. The volunteers, are boots on the ground to making the exhibitions, setting up the chairs for the panels, and, troubleshooting the speaker system for the presentation. It's so important. So if you, want to get involved, there's an avenue. So just go to the website, either Sloss Metal Arts or nccciap.com. And just, right, we want to see everyone. We want to see everyone.
Exactly.
We want to see your artwork, and we want you to see what the rest of the community.
You'll love it here.
Yeah. And they already know. You guys know.
Exactly.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for being on the show. We're going to go on over to the after show, but for the public audience, let's just say goodbye to them. Thanks for listening in on this conversation with us. But Steve, thanks so much for being on the show today. It was an honor.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and hope to, as you said, the sign off, see you at Sloss.
See you at Sloss. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. You could probably tell that during this interview, I was soaking in all of the information that Steve shared about the intricacies of Sloss. Knowing this new information has really given me a deeper appreciation for all of the work that the local folks contribute to keep the programs at Sloss running and also to host our beloved biennial conference. Steve, thank you for sharing so many intimate details about Sloss, but also about your personal life as well. As a self-proclaimed non-artist, the details about your family and your early years help paint the picture of why you support Sloss and artists as much as you do. I can also understand the satisfaction you receive in return, knowing that you are appropriately using your gifts and strengths to help others who otherwise would be greatly disadvantaged. Thank you for listening to our needs and fighting to give us the support we need. And now, thank you to our top supporters for helping me afford the production costs of this show. Thank you to the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance for joining as a top supporter of the show, and I am so honored and encouraged to have your support. I'm excited to be able to help you get the word out as your events develop, and thank you for all of the work that you do in service to the Western region of the U.S. and its cast iron artists. And thank you, Sloss Metal Arts, for being a top supporter. We are all looking forward to heading to Birmingham and visiting your site for the national conference this upcoming April 5th through the 8th. And folks, registration is open, so go get your tickets. I've already got mine. Go get yours. Sign up for workshops. Submit your work to the exhibition. Let them know you're coming. So yes, thank you to the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance and to Sloss Metal Arts for supporting this podcast, as well as our other individual supporters on Patreon. The funds that they contribute are invaluable and help me to continue to produce these episodes. So in return for their support, I offer an after show recording from each episode. And by now, you already probably know that it's just an extra 15 to 20 minutes with the show's guest, where we talk a little more candidly and share at least one more story. So if you are not signed up for Patreon, but you want to hear today's after show or get access to all of the earlier after shows from the previous guests, you can for as little as $1 a month. Go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/thepodcastiron. And there you can choose a contribution level that fits within your budget. But supporters at any level get access to the after show from each episode. If you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast on Patreon, that's okay. Instead, please share the podcast with someone you think would be interested in listening or watching, and I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps, and for that I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.